The first light of dawn spreads across the Kalahari like a thin golden veil, brushing the sand with warmth before the heat arrives. In this fragile moment between night and day, the desert holds its breath. The wind is silent, the air still, and the life that hides beneath the dunes waits for its signal. I stand at the edge of a shallow basin, notebook in hand, watching as the sun spills over the horizon. Every morning here feels like the first page of a story the earth hasn't finished writing. The Kalahari, often mistaken for an empty wasteland, is a world built on survival, strategy, and ancient rhythms. The sand is not lifeless, it is the keeper of secrets, hiding tunnels, burrows, footprints, and histories that stretch far beyond human memory. Over the last 3 months, my team and I have been tracking one of the desert's most elusive residents, the brown hyena. Known locally as the strandwolf, this solitary scavenger is one of the least studied mammals on the continent. Stories surround it, some mystical, some fearful, but real understanding has always remained just out of reach. Our journey began with a single print found on a moonlit night. The hyena had passed by only minutes earlier, its tracks crisp and deep in the cool sand. We followed them until the desert swallowed the trail. But that brief encounter ignited a pursuit that would define our entire expedition. Every night we returned to that place, setting up camera traps, marking fresh tracks, and mapping movement patterns. The desert rarely repeats itself, yet slowly a picture began to emerge. Life in the Kalahari revolves around two things: water and patience. Both are scarce. Daytime temperatures can rise beyond 40 degrees Celsius, and shade becomes a currency worth more than gold. Even the clouds seem to conserve themselves, reluctant to gather. The Bushmen say the Kalahari breathes, it expands and contracts, offering and withholding life with careful balance. Once you learn to breathe with it, you can begin to feel its heartbeat. One evening, just after the sky turned the color of burning copper, we noticed a group of meerkats standing upright atop a mound, their silhouettes sharp against the fading sun. They chattered nervously, tails twitching. Something had disturbed them. Moments later, we found fresh hyena tracks circling the mound. The hyena had likely approached to investigate leftovers from the meerkats, foraging. Though hyenas are often portrayed as fierce hunters, the brown hyena relies mostly on scavenging and is surprisingly gentle compared to its relatives. Yet its presence is enough to stir anxiety in smaller animals. After weeks of anticipation, persistence rewarded us. At 2:16 a.m. on a still night, a camera trap captured the first clear image of the strandwolf. The hyena's long shaggy coat shimmered silver under the infrared sensor, giving it an almost ghost-like appearance. Its head was lowered, ears perked, nose to the ground as it searched for traces of food. For a moment, it paused in front of the camera, eyes glowing like two small moons. Then, with silent confidence, it vanished into the darkness once again. We replayed the footage dozens of times. Each viewing felt like witnessing a secret ceremony. But finding the hyena was only the beginning. We wanted to understand its route, its behavior, its relationships with the other creatures that relied on this fragile ecosystem. We placed additional cameras along a dry riverbed where animals traditionally travel. A few days later, the cameras began to reveal a hidden world: porcupines waddling with surprising speed, aardwolves quietly licking termites, jackals trotting in pairs, and owl species gliding between trees like living shadows. The Kalahari was far from empty, it was a world. Alive with motion, but only if you watched at the right hours. The brown hyena returned repeatedly, sometimes alone, sometimes accompanied by a smaller individual, a juvenile, perhaps its offspring. Their interactions were gentle, almost affectionate. The adult allowed the young one to feed first from a decaying carcass of a springbok. The desert's harshness teaches cooperation, not cruelty. We documented every sighting, noting patterns. The hyena's territory stretched almost 40 square kilometers, yet it navigated this vast area with precision, revisiting certain landmarks with predictable timing. These animals weren't wandering aimlessly, they were following ancient routes encoded in instinct. As the weeks passed, we ventured deeper into the desert, traveling by foot to avoid disturbing wildlife. One afternoon, a dust storm rolled in from the south. The sky darkened, and visibility shrank to a few meters. The storm moved with terrifying speed, roaring like an angry ocean. Sand struck our skin with the sharpness of glass shards. We crouched behind a dune, covering our equipment. For nearly an hour, the storm raged. But when silence finally returned, the desert looked transformed. Dunes had shifted. Tracks had disappeared. The landscape was new again, as if the storm had painted over its own story. It took 2 days to relocate our camera traps. Many had been buried deeply under fresh layers of sand. Some were damaged beyond repair. But the wildlife, resilient as always, had already resumed their routines. We found new tracks nearby, fresh, clear, unmistakable. The hyena had passed by only hours after the storm. It seemed to know exactly where to go, even when the entire desert had changed shape. One evening, while following a dried watercourse, we encountered a herd of gemsbok. Their long, straight horns caught the sinking sunlight like polished spears. They stood motionless at first, assessing us, but soon returned to grazing on sparse grasses. Their survival is a miracle of adaptation. They can raise their body temperature to avoid sweating and conserve water, a biological trick honed over thousands of years. Watching them felt like witnessing evolution's quiet triumph. But the desert is not only harsh to animals. It tests humans too, mentally and physically. Supplies dwindled, radios occasionally failed, and nights grew bitterly cold. The silence can be overwhelming, pressing into your mind until even your heartbeat feels loud. Yet in that silence, there is clarity. Each morning brought new signs, beetle trails like tiny calligraphy, bird feathers half buried in sand, the faint rumble of lions on distant dunes. Everything here is connected in delicate balance. Our greatest breakthrough came unexpectedly. One night, while scanning the horizon with thermal binoculars, we spotted movement near an abandoned aardvark burrow. The heat signature was unmistakably large. We approached slowly, keeping the wind in our favor. After several minutes, the figure emerged into view, the adult brown hyena, standing tall against the faint moonlight. Beside it was the younger one, now more confident, its coat fluffy and striped. We watched from a respectful distance as the adult began vocalizing, a low, eerie call unlike anything we had heard before. It echoed across the dunes, a sound both haunting and beautiful. This call, we later realized, was a territorial announcement, a form of communication essential for avoiding conflict with neighboring hyena clans. In the vast desert, even communication is an art of survival. For nearly 20 minutes, the hyenas interacted, grooming each other, exploring the area, sniffing the air for scents carried by the wind. When they finally disappeared into the darkness, we remained frozen, aware that we had witnessed a rare moment, one no camera trap could ever truly capture. Days later, as our expedition neared its end, the desert presented one final gift. At dawn, while packing equipment, we discovered a fresh carcass nearby, a springbok likely killed by a cheetah during the night. Tracks told the story: the chase, the takedown, the feeding. But the cheetah had eaten only a portion. Within hours, the brown hyena arrived. We watched quietly as it approached the kill with characteristic caution, sniffing, circling, testing the air. Then it settled down to feed, pulling the remains with surprising gentleness. This was the strandwolf fulfilling its role as nature's cleaner. Without scavengers like the brown hyena, disease would spread quickly, and nutrient cycles would collapse. The hyena was not a villain, as myths often portray, but a caretaker of the desert. As we prepared to leave the Kalahari, the wind carried the morning's last cool breath. I took one final look across the stretching dunes. The desert had changed us. It had shown us that even in the harshest environments, life flourishes with breathtaking intelligence. Every animal, from the smallest termite to the ghost-like hyena, plays a role in an ancient, fragile harmony. The brown hyena, once a mystery, now felt familiar, an emblem of quiet resilience hidden beneath a wild coat of dust and shadow. It reminded us that the planet's most extraordinary stories are often unfolding far from the places humans choose to look. And as the sun climbed higher, igniting the desert with its relentless fire, one truth became clear: the Kalahari is not empty. It is alive, it is listening, and it has stories to tell long after our footprints fade from its sands.